One of the biggest reasons people still love the Mortal Kombat 3D era isn't because every character was amazing. Because let's be honest, some of them weren't, some of them were weird, some of them were just forgettable, and some of them look like they were created after somebody lost a bet. But what made the 3D era special wasn't perfection. It was ambition, Deadly Alliance, Deception, and Armageddon. These games were constantly introducing new characters, new realms, new factions, and new ideas. The problem was that a lot of those ideas never went anywhere. And before we start, this is not an underrated characters video. I already done those. This isn't a bring these characters back video. This video is specifically about the 3D era characters that Mortal Kombat failed during the 3D era itself. Because when you look back at the games, Deadly Alliance, Deception, and Armageddon, one thing becomes painfully obvious. The 3D era wasn't lacking creativity, it was lacking commitment. Mortal Kombat kept introducing fascinating concepts and then abandoning them before they could fully develop. It's like somebody built an entire amusement park and then only let people ride 3 attractions. And that's one of the most frustrating things about this era. Not what these characters became, but what they could have become, because they had so much potential. But before we get into my list, I'm Mr. Frosty Flames, but you can call me Mike. We do anything gaming news, reviews, playthroughs, analysis, and we do it in a chill way with no over editing BS. So if you like that style of content, be sure to hit that sub button and join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Anyways, let's get back to the video. So the first character that I chose was one that I personally want them to bring back, and I think it's one of the biggest missed opportunities in the franchise, and that's Hotaru. Because every time I look at Hotaru, I see a rivalry that should have defined the 3D era. Think about his concept. He's a warrior from the realm of order, or Sado, a man obsessed with law, structure, and control. Then Mortal Kombat gives him the perfect opposite. Havik. Chaos versus order, freedom versus control. This should have been Mortal Kombat's version of an external conflict. Instead, their rivalry barely exists. Most fans know Havik, he's an MK1. A lot of people don't even remember Hotaru, and that's the problem. The setup was already perfect, the games just never followed through. Hotaru didn't need a rewrite, he just needed some attention. And the next 2 characters, I'm sort of mashing them into one, and they both came in Mortal Kombat Deception, and that's Kira and Cobra. These 2 get roasted constantly, and honestly, I understand why. Cobra got hit with the discount Ken Masters allegation immediately. Even in his fighting style, it says Ken. Kira often felt like Mortal Kombat throwing multiple characters into a blender, and then out came Kira. But I don't think their biggest problem was their designs. Their biggest problem was that Mortal Kombat never gave them room to grow. The Black Dragon desperately needed some fresh faces because, Kano couldn't carry the whole faction forever. It was just Kano and Cabal before this. And Kira and Cobra could have became the future, but instead the games introduced them and then immediately forgot about them. They were barely in the conquest mode in Mortal Kombat Deception, which is a shame because this is the game they got introduced in. It's hard to develop a reputation when your own franchises barely remembers you exist. And that's all I could really say about them because there's really nothing. And the next character that I have is actually Kai. You see, Kai might be the strangest example on this list because Mortal Kombat actually seemed to have plans for him. He was a student of Liu Kang, a protector of Earthrealm. He was supposed to be like a younger generation hero. Everything about Kai screamed like a future protagonist. Then the perfect opportunity arrives. In Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, basically the next one after Kai is introduced, Liu Kang dies. The franchise desperately needs new heroes, and somehow Kai is, where is he? He's not even there. It's honestly impressive. The setup was right there, the opportunity was right there, his role was right there, yet the 3D era never committed. Kai feels like a character the writers accidentally left in another room. And I understand, everyone was saying, oh, Kai is bad because he's super generic, he just shoots fire balls, his design's generic, blah blah blah, but he still could have had some substance. That's where you take his character and just do a little rewrite, especially in Mortal Kombat Deception where the graphics are better. You could easily redesign his character into something cooler. The next character that I have is Mavado, and one of my favorite characters from the 3D era, and I feel like he's one of the biggest examples of wasted world building, because on paper this guy should have been super important. He's the leader of the Red Dragon clan, he has a built-in rivalry with Cabal, he literally steals his hook swords, which is a super unique weapon, he is in an interesting faction, everything was there. The Red Dragon should have been one of the biggest organizations motivations in Mortal Kombat, perhaps even bigger than the Black Dragon. Instead, they mostly felt like background characters. This is something the 3D era struggled with. It kept making the universe bigger, making new characters, but it rarely gave its concepts enough time and room to breathe. Mavado isn't remembered of what he accomplished. He's remembered because fans see what he could have been. He looks cool. This guy eases aura, but he just never has a time to shine. The next character is Hsu Hao. Poor Hsu Hao. This guy never stood a chance. The moment he appeared, the fan base decided that he was public enemy number one. I'm serious. And look, I understand some of this criticism. His design wasn't exactly inspiring. What was he? He was like a shirtless Chinese police officer or something. I remember hearing Mr. G-Star 321 say that, and I remember laughing so much. But his personality wasn't memorable either. But here's my issue. Mortal Kombat never even tried to fix him. Other franchises reinvent characters all the time. A bad first impression doesn't have to be permanent, but instead of rebuilding Hsu Hao, Mortal Kombat essentially erased him from existence. He's like a joke now. It's like the franchise saw the criticism and immediately hit the eject button. Could he have become a great character? Maybe. We'll never know, but they stopped trying. I would like to see him come back. It would have been so fun if he was a Mortal Kombat 1 cameo, but we never really see him anymore. We never even hear from him. I remember the last time we heard from him, he was in the Aaron Black intro where Aaron Black killed him or something. But the next character that I have is Jarek. Jarek suffers from a different problem, and I think that's timing. Because Jarek wasn't introduced as Jarek, he was introduced as Kano Jr., he was not Kano. And that's a terrible position to be in, because every time fans looked at him, they saw Kano. Every comparison hurt him. He had them laser eyes, he had the Kano ball, he had everything. And Mortal Kombat never gave him enough identity to escape that shadow of being Kano Jr. The funny thing is that Jarek could have actually worked as his own character, but the games never gave him enough opportunities to stand apart. Instead, he became one of the easiest punching bags in the franchise. I don't know if I want to see him return. If they do, he would need a major rework. And the next character I chose was actually a main character in Mortal Kombat 1, or at least a main roster character, I should say, and that's Nitara. Nitara might be the biggest missed opportunity on this entire list with now Mortal Kombat 1, because unlike some of the other characters, her concept was genuinely fantastic. She's a vampire from another realm. That's already interesting. Then you could add her race, her world, her motivations, and suddenly you got a character who could have expanded Mortal Kombat's universe in a major way. The 3D era introduced entire realms and civilizations, and Nitara should have been one of the faces of that expansion. Instead, she spent most of her existence sitting on the bench. The potential was enormous. I mean, through the roof. The follow-up just wasn't. The next character I chose was actually Drahmin. Remember Drahmin? He's a weird character, and that's exactly why I love him. Because look at this guy. He is an Oni demon wearing a green mask, carrying a giant club, and he's covered in flies. He's like a better version of Meat. If I had to describe him, he looked like a rejected Silent Hill boss. And I mean that in the best way possible, because he stood out immediately. He wasn't just another ninja or just another, martial artist, a generic character. He felt unique. But the problem is that uniqueness alone isn't enough. The 3D era never really pushed him beyond his initial concept, so instead of becoming a memorable monster character, he became like a footnote. Sometimes you see references to him in the modern MK games, like you'll see his mask, but that's about it. And then the next character I chose was actually Dairou. Remember him from Mortal Kombat Deception? If there's one character who perfectly represents this video's argument, it's Dairou. Because most fans don't hate Dairou, most fans don't love Dairou, most fans don't even know Dairou exists. And honestly, that's worse, because Dairou wasn't given enough story, he didn't have enough rivalries or enough momentum to even matter. He's basically the definition of untapped potential, a character introduced into a crowded era and never given a reason to stand out. I think he's like a mercenary or like a bounty hunter. He's basically like if Aaron Black was more just like a martial arts mercenary, but just lessened to an extent where like nobody even knows him. Like, if I had to point out one of the most forgettable Mortal Kombat characters, it would probably be Dairou. And the last character I chose is a character that almost escaped this list, and a character that I probably love the most out of everyone in this list, and that's Havik. Because unlike most of these characters, fans actually loved Havik. His concept worked, his design worked, his lore worked, and everything worked. You know, he's a cleric of chaos who literally tears himself apart during fights. That's awesome. People immediately connected with him, yet even Havik wasn't utilized as much as he should have been. And that's what makes him so important to this discussion, because if Havik struggled to get meaningful attention during the 3D era, imagine how difficult it was for everyone else. He's proof that the issue wasn't just character quality, the issue was that Mortal Kombat kept creating ideas faster than it could develop them. So in the end, when people criticize the 3D era, they usually talk about gameplay or graphics or balance, but honestly I think the bigger issue was something else. The 3D era created far more interesting ideas than it knew what to do with them. And that's why so many of these characters are still discussed today, not because what they became, but because what they could have become. Like what I said in the intro, Hotaru could have had one of the greatest rivalries in the franchise history. Kai could have been Earthrealm's next champion. Nitara could have expanded the universe. Mavado could have elevated the black or the red dragon, getting them mixed up here. Even characters like Hsu Hao and Jarek could have been reinvented. Instead, many of them were just abandoned before they never even got the chance. And that's why I don't view these characters as failures. They're more like missed opportunities, if I had to say it. The real failure wasn't the characters, the real failure was that the 3D era never fully committed to them. And honestly, that might be the biggest tragedy of Mortal Kombat's most creative era. But that's just my take on them. What do you guys think down below? What do you think is the most missed opportunity character in Mortal Kombat history? If I had to pinpoint one, I'd say it's either probably Havik and Hotaru, their rivalry of order and chaos. I mean, because that was really interesting to me. And then if I had to choose a second, it must be probably Mavado, because he's just cool. He has aura. But let me know in the comments down below. Well, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Ciao.